James, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me here. You've heard how I came to be proudly responsible for the Tesco business. I have a very simple story I'm going to share with you in 20 minutes or so about what it is I and the team have been involved in over the last 2.5 years. But it will be simple because it will talk about a customer centricity that goes through everything we're trying to do at Tesco. Now, I was aware, but you've had some of the introduction. I was asked to give a little bit of an introduction to Tesco. So for those who are not familiar, we operate in 10 markets. We serve about 80 million customers a week. We employ about 460,000 people, and we have supply partnerships in a little over 70 countries in the world. Group sales around £50 billion last year. The story I'm going to share with you is around the turnaround that's been going on in that 2.5 years. I'll share with you a little bit what it is we're trying to build into our organization around the purpose and what it is we're doing about building a more differentiated brand as we put that customer at the center of everything we do. And I'll finish off by talking about partnerships and some of the things we've been doing with GS1. The facts are really stark and really simple for those who are not in the UK or not familiar. Back in 2014, in September, we were in a position in Tesco where for the last 4 years, the volume in our business had been declining. Our transaction rates had been declining. We were losing market share. At its height, Tesco had 32.3% of the UK's grocery market. And back in September, that had fallen to 28. And if that wasn't enough, we recorded in that year the second largest corporate loss in UK history at £6.7 billion of loss. So that's sort of where we started from to put some substance to what you heard. We set ourselves 3 very simple priorities. In that sort of crisis, you need to keep it really simple. We talked about how do we regain that competitiveness in the UK. There were some very particular issues in our balance sheet, and we needed to protect and strengthen that. So we weren't flush with funds as we talked about the turnaround. And there was a really key issue in terms of the trust and the transparency that was in the brand and indeed the business case. Now, the truth of it is we talk in our business about 4 key stakeholders. We talk about our colleagues, we talk about our customers, we talk about suppliers, and we talk about our shareholders. Now, you heard I spent 28 years of my life in Unilever, and I was joining a retailer for the first time. The things that they have in common for me are customers. We call them consumers when I sit in FMCG. We call them customers when I talk about it in retail. But the whole thing was, how do you put them right at the center of what you do? How do you listen? We spent a huge amount of time listening. Now, the thing that was really interesting is, there were some pretty difficult things to listen to at that time, right? Only 7 out of 10 colleagues in Tesco at that time would recommend it as a place to work, right? If you measured the trust in the brand, we got to a place in October of 2014 where the trust in the brand, as measured by the indices here in the UK, was 0. Right? Was 0. And only 50% of our suppliers were happy with the relationship we had. You may have heard about some of that in the media, but some really poor relationships with key partners. And we were on our 5th profit warning at that point. So most of our stakeholders had some very clear messages for us at the time, but the listening was really important, particularly when what they had to say were things that perhaps were really quite difficult to hear. We set about a journey which was really very simple. We talked to colleagues, we talked to all of those stakeholders, and with colleagues on board, we said we needed our business to move. We needed our business to move. Tesco, and I can say this because I had nothing at all to do with it, but if you know Tesco at all, I think most people would know that in the heights of the 90s and the 2000s, nobody ran shops anywhere in the world better than Tesco did. So the operational model within inside Tesco is brilliant. I saw it from my Unilever when I saw every customer in the world, and Tesco were the best at running shops just about anywhere for about a decade. Actually, we were saying it's not enough. We need to move from running shops to serving people. And with keeping some pace, we designed a purpose with our colleagues about what it was the organization existed for. And I haven't got time to show you the background of how we did that, but basically inside the business now, wherever you go, here in the UK, we would say, serving Britain's shoppers a little better every day. Right? Serving Thailand shoppers a little better every day. Serving Oxford Street shoppers a little better every day. Serving this neighborhood shop a little better every day. And what we wanted was, we wanted a purpose for the organization that every one of those 460,000 people and all of the partnerships we had could ask ourselves the question, what is it we're doing to serve those shoppers a little bit better every day? The thing that's phenomenal as a marketeer, which is in my background, is just the amount of frequency that a Tesco brand has here in the UK. When I worked in Unilever, if I lost a customer, it would be another 3 or 6 or 9 months in the purchase cycle that I could fight to win them back. In Tesco, the frequency with which people can visit you gives you an opportunity. So if every time somebody comes back, we give them an experience that was better than they had before, we could rebuild the brand. It was as simple as that. But we needed nearly 500,000 people to be motivated by that purpose. There were 3 values in the business. The first 2, no one tries harder for customers, and we treat people how they want to be treated, have been in the organization for decades. They were written by colleagues. They said there was nothing wrong with the values, Dave, you just need to live them. And that's what we've been trying to do. In addition to that, we talked about the fact that given our reach, that every time we make a small change, we can make a big difference. And that's really exciting for people who want to work in our business, because the impact we can have is enormous. And if I've got time, I'll share with you 1 or 2 examples. So what did we do? Putting customers at the heart. If you want to come to a retail store, you want good service, good availability, great range, and price. If you don't have those things, have a guess what? Over time, frequency, penetration, everything declines. Right? If you don't get, I suspect in everybody's business, you don't get the basics right, you don't get a chance to differentiate and do anything sexy. So actually, whilst we were in a pretty perilous position, the first thing we did was recruit 9,000 more colleagues into the store. Right? Because when you listen to customers, when you walk the stores, the core offer was just not good enough. Right? So we invested in service. We took out a huge amount of range, which was not just clogging up our operation, but making it very difficult for customers to shop the store. And when we looked at the availability, we measured it from our .com, our picking for delivery in the morning, and it was 99.4%. And I know someone sitting in the front row here who'd developed that system, right? But actually, if you went at 6 o'clock on a Thursday evening, it was nowhere near that. And so we had to say, actually, is our availability good when people most wanted it to be? And we invested there. And at the same time, and you saw the loss I talked about, we lowered our prices by 6%. But the key thing was, can we get our core offer right for customers, again, in the key UK market? And this was where we started from. But then we needed to differentiate. And the way I'm going to talk about putting the customer at the heart of what we did was talk about it through the brand. And what we were keen to do is, how do we rebuild the relationship and the brand? And you heard something of it in the John Lewis presentation that I had the opportunity to listen to. And here's just some examples. We wanted to find the things that Tesco could uniquely do. Okay? So I know there's some brand owners in the room. But if you sit where I do, and remember I did nearly 30 years in Unilever building brands, you know, Dove in Tesco is the same by definition as Dove in all of my competitors. So my ability to differentiate based on those brands, really very difficult. The one thing that I can do is say to my customers, do you know what, if those are the brands you love, and we support them wholeheartedly, we'll make sure that your brands are never more expensive in Tesco anytime you want them, and we introduced a brand guarantee. Taking away the choice or the necessity for people to shop around to get great value, only Tesco could do that. You will have read maybe around the launch of exclusive new brands. We created brands to meet a price point that were only available in Tesco, and we invested in new trends. So for the last 3 years, Tesco's been the free-from retailer of the year here in the UK. It understood that there was gluten, wheat, and other food intolerances that needed to be there. And whilst we have 28% share of the grocery market, we have something like 41, 42% of that food intolerance market. Again, by differentiating, adding something to the brand that was unique within the Tesco offering. We also said, actually, there are some things customers don't see, and we'll talk about that in the context of standards in a second. And that was around reformulation. So we set ourselves some guidelines in terms of we'll only change a product in our business if we can improve the taste profile and the health profile. And we set about a huge program of reformulation, and you may have seen some of that before. And we tapped into the emotion around food with an advertising campaign, which for the first time in 20 years put food right at the heart of a relationship between Tesco and its customers. And just to give an illustration, we also thought around other elements of service, which is to have our own and only app that allows payment and loyalty to come together in one place. It's called PayQuick. It's available in all Tesco stores. And actually, it's a service that our customers value that they can only get from Tesco. So what I'm trying to illustrate is when you say to yourself, what is it you can do that adds value to your customer that serves them a little better every day, it's actually quite multifaceted. Get the basics right every day, everywhere, and then start to differentiate so that actually there's a reason why they choose us versus somebody else. Now, if you were to go in one of the large stores while you're here in the UK, you would see this. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of very real just examples that are right now. Right? Health is a big issue, and sitting with Fiona on the table knows it only too well. Right? My customers have been telling me for 2.5 years, we want to do something about eating more healthily. They have 4 big problems. They don't understand it. Right? They really don't understand it. We might want them to, the government might want them to, but they don't understand it. In terms of saturated fat, sodium, they do not completely understand it. They complain bitterly that we and brand owners charge them more for healthier alternatives, and they find it really difficult to navigate in store what the trade-off decisions are, and they all think that there's a trade-off in taste. So those are the barriers to something our customers say they want. So our job, serve them a little better every day. What do? If you walk into our stores today, and for the last 2 weeks and for another week thereafter, what we've done is we pulled together alternatives side by side. We call them little swaps, and we show, and there's just one example here, which is if you move from, let's call it for want of better, I hope the Ambrosia people not in the room, normal custard to the light custard, 2 things happen. We give you the nutritional information to show what that little swap is. With our partners, we put all of the promotional money into the so-called healthier alternative. So actually the price barrier is taken away, and we invite people to make that change. At the same time in our stores, we're running all the health awareness checks, so obesity checks, fat checks, lots of different things. We challenged ourselves, because the other side of this is to move more. So myself and a few other Tesco colleagues, we've got to move 1 million miles in 4 weeks. Which if you go into one of our stores, you see lots of people furiously cycling in order to do that. And next week, for the first time, we have a charity partnership, which is with the British Heart Foundation, Diabetes UK, and Cancer Research UK, so the 3 biggest health-related charities here in the UK. And all the money that's being raised through the charity partnership, we have a 3-year relationship with them, but we'll invite our customers to round up in order to make a donation against health. So for us, it's a listening to customers. Can we change our business model? This has never been done before. Right? So everybody who's sitting in the room saying, how the hell did you demand forecast this? We don't know. Right? We have no idea whether people will move or not. But we think it's enough of a big enough issue that we should try. And if you were to, just to bring this all together, right? So what you see, this is from a store not too far from here. If you take the basket that people buy today, and you give them the alternative little swaps, and if they were to take all of those alternatives, just think about this for a second. That basket would be 65% lower in saturated fat, 38% lower in sugar, and 27% lower in salt. And given the way that we've put the promotion and price investment together, it would also be 17% cheaper. So the point is, can we serve shoppers a little better every day by listening and changing the way that we run our business? Right? Don't know what the results will be, but that's what we're trying to do. And I couldn't resist putting this in here. This is a screenshot from yesterday's Bloomberg. Biggest single issue for UK customers at the minute, inflation. rising prices. We've been very vocal about wanting to resist those price rises on behalf of our customers. And, this is basically what one of the investment houses has done. They've done their own research, and they've realized that actually we are using the way we're partnering and buying and changing the business model so that prices for UK customers are lower and not increasing as much in Tesco as they are in our competitive sense. So again, those who know Tesco well, Tesco always did well when it did something for customers when they needed it most. This is their issue of today, so we need to do something to serve them a little better every day. Now, finally, when we talk about partnerships, the interesting thing here is about collaboration. Now, Tesco has 5 long-standing leadership skills that we assess our people on. And the number one, and the only one I'm going to talk about in this session, is collaboration. Now, we had, I said before, a poor relationship with suppliers. So whilst we put the customer at the heart of everything we did, our supply partnerships became crucial. And we sat down and we completely reformed the way we wanted to engage with our suppliers, and a number of our partners are in the room. The good news is that in terms of simplicity and ease to deal with, the way we communicate and the way that we treat our suppliers, we see a fundamental shift in their feedback to us. We see a fundamental different engagement around what it is we're trying to do together. And the interesting thing, and I know there's a lot of supply chain colleagues in the room, you get to a place where I told you before we had 4 years of volume decline, which when you're our size becomes really quite punitive in your operational leverage. But for the last 2 years, 2.5 years, we've turned that around. So we've got that wonderful virtuous circle where the volume is growing. We've managed through that partnership to lower the stock by 300 million since that time, and our availability has never been higher. And if you look at this in terms of range versus my key competitors, we went from being the worst in terms of availability to being the best in the UK through that partnership arrangement. So that leaves me to say 2 things, and there are 2 initiatives that I'd just like to call out as an illustration of partnership that are clearly central to GS1. One is the area of digital DNA, the ability to serve shoppers a little better by providing them with better information, be it nutritional, be it quality, be it provenance. Again, we can talk about what it would be in terms of data-embedded barcodes. They don't want us to waste. We don't want to waste. The ability as an industry to share information better so that we could serve them better exists. My one plea for these 2 initiatives would be they become industry initiatives. As Tesco, we really do want to support industry initiatives. We don't want disparity in lots and lots of different ways, because then actually it's really very hard to serve customers a little better every day. But so far so good. We would be very supportive of both. And with 1 minute left, 2 charts. Where are we now? Movement in terms of colleagues, 83% in February of this year said great place to work. Still means 17% are not completely happy, so I've still got quite a lot to do. Interestingly, from a trust point of view of 0, we were the most improved brand in the UK last year, and we have a trust level in our brand that we've not had for about 8 years in the UK. We talk about behaving our way differently. You can't talk your way out of something you behaved your way into, so how do you give customers an experience that allow them to reevaluate? And that's what we see here. The relationship with suppliers transformed. Nearly 80%, in some categories, 90% of really good relationships with suppliers. And yes, we had 4 profit warnings, and we did have a very difficult position in terms of profitability. It's not high, the margin, but at least it's positive at 2.3. And for those who track, you will have seen this. Our business is driven by 6 things for the next few years. Building a more differentiated brand, and then cost, we can reduce more. Cash, we can. We'll drive a mix to 3.5 or 4, so we're a little more than half the way there at 2.3. There's things we can do in property, and there's a lot to come in terms of innovation. I share you those for completeness in the context of the bit that's most important to what I was here to talk to you about is putting the customer right at the heart of everything you do, serving them a little better every day, asking yourself, can I change everything? Am I prepared to change everything in the business if it serves the customer a little better? Yes, I am. And the part of that which is in these thrusts is that differentiated brand. So with that, and 23 seconds to go, I'll stop. All right.